After testing 50 B2B influencer strategies, I found 5 that are crushing it in 2024. I'll show you exactly what's working and why. I'm Morgan J. Ingram, CEO of AMP, a B2B influencer marketing agency, and we've run campaigns for giants like HubSpot, Slack, and LinkedIn. So I got some insight for you. So I'm going to share with you what's really moving the needle in B2B influencer marketing and how you could be replicating this too. So stay tuned for a free checklist on how to launch your own high converting campaign that you can use right after this. But before we do into that, what's your biggest challenge with B2B influencer marketing today? Let me know in the comments and we can start the conversation. But let's get into it. Why B2B influencer marketing? Well, my belief is that B2B sales and go-to-market is completely changing. It's not about just making 1,000 cold calls or spray and pray or doing just brand post. We have to build our go-to-market and our entire motion of sales around people who can create content to create awareness in the market, which makes it easier, right, to convert opportunities, right, with your sales process. And so what we're seeing across the board and all the different pieces that I'm seeing too is that it's just becoming incredibly difficult to convert opportunities with outbound. So that's why we have to be looking at different ways to stand out in the market. And that's why you have to leverage it through people. So if you're looking to increase pipeline and revenue, influencer marketing is something that you want to tap into because celebrities, influencers are continuously growing. People buy from people and they want to buy people for the people that they trust, and influence is the new attention and trust. So these are the 5 things that I'm seeing on how you can leverage influencer marketing in different ways. Number 1, employee advocacy. So this does not mean go give your employees posts and tell them to just post on LinkedIn or all the other platforms. That is essentially like doing a spray and pray cold email campaign that I just said that was dead. Unless you don't want responses. Unless you're like, hey, Morgan, I don't want any responses. I'm good with no responses. And I'm cool with sitting things out. Fantastic. You can do that. I'm just telling you, that ain't it, bruh. So what we want to do is we want to have an employee advocacy program where we're tapping into, I believe, 2 to 4 executives who can be the megaphone of your company. On LinkedIn, you will see 3 to 5x more engagement by the executive posting on their personal profile than the company brand. And we're even seeing that obviously on other platforms as well across the board. So you want to make sure that the employees are megaphoning their own voice of what they're learning and what they have the insight in their own company. And that's going to be a way that brings it back to your company, what you're building across the board. But you want to make sure the employees feel equipped to share their own voice. Don't give them something and then give them a script on what to do, because that ultimately at the end of the day won't lead to the conversion you're looking for. So make sure to tap into employees to be that extra channel of content that can lead into more pipeline as well. And the way you do that is to say, hey, here are the 3 ways of how you can go about and deliver content. The 3 ways of how you can deliver content. Number 1, video, like we're doing this right now. Text, like written posts. And then audio, like if you did a podcast. So you can split it up, right? And say an executive can host a podcast, and maybe your director is posting on LinkedIn and doing text posts. Maybe you have someone else doing videos. That's a way that you can get your employees involved on top of everything that you're doing. You can even get the sales reps involved too if you want to. I've seen that be successful, but you definitely need to tap into your executives first. So that's how you do the employee advocacy the right way. Now we got the employee advocacy rolling. Then the next thing we need to do is look at micro influencer campaigns. Now, the way that you can go about this absolutely wrong is just to get all the micro influencers in the world and just say, let's run our campaign. That's absolutely not the right way of doing it. So when you're looking at what micro influencers to tap into, you need to understand what niche topics do they have the engagement for. So I'll give myself as an example. When I first started creating content in 2016 on LinkedIn, I didn't talk about influencer marketing or overall sales, how to negotiate close, or how to do LinkedIn. The only thing I talked about was sales development reps. And so for those of you who don't know what that is, it is a tech sales entry-level role where you do cold calls, cold emails, and cold social. You do everything to book meetings. But I didn't know anything of that yet. All I knew was that role, and I documented my journey on that. So that's the only thing I talked about. So I was a niche creator or a micro influencer, but I had a heavily engaged audience because I only talked about sales development. Now it's more broad, but I only talked about sales development then. So My point is that you want to find people who that you want to partner with the brands. And what we've done is we find people that are good in a topic, and we partner with them with a brand that is on that topic. So for example, one of the brands that I work with, like, they are hyper focused on cold calling. So what does that mean? We found another micro influencer that just talks about cold calling, and that's a match made in heaven right there. Even though they had 8,000 followers, they have a highly engaged audience of 8,000 people that just want to learn more about cold calling. So that's easy to bring them on to something and say, hey, we're going to talk about cold calling, because that's all they do is talk about cold calling. And now it makes it a lot easier for them. So that's where I say the micro influencer campaigns work really well. And we've even seen it at AMP, at our influencer marketing agency, when we run produce shows, which is going to be the next point I'm about to make. We have a list of people, and I encourage you all to do this as well. We have a list of people of micro influencers, and then we have the topics next to them to then see which topics map to each person across the board. So that's just another thing that we're doing that obviously leads to value, and it leads to us getting the results that we're looking for, right? So that's what I would tell you on the micro influencer campaign. Match them with the right topics and you're good to go. Again, I just mentioned this. The next thing is, this fun part is live video collaborations, or what we like to call live shows. You could think about these as a webinar, but also this is where things can go wrong. I'm making this face because I'm like, this is where things get a little sus for people. When you do a webinar, I think webinar has started to get a negative connotation. Y'all agree with that? Put in the comments if you think that webinar has had a negative connotation. I believe that that is the case as well. So when I think of a webinar, it's like, I'm going to watch this show or event, and it's just going to be slides. People are going to just talk at me. It's going to be boring. No one's going to be excited. And I'm just going to be like, this sucks. That's like most webinars. So we decided to flip that and say we call them shows, and we call each webinar like thing, like let's say like an episode. We call it an episode, right? So each webinar segment is an episode, and within that episode, we make it highly interactive, and then we get, like I said, point number 2, we bring in micro influencers as a part of that too. So what am I saying here? We create a show that you want to bring people in, because this creates episodic content that people can follow. And I really just pay attention to trends that have already happened in a creative space, and I leverage them in B2B. So if you think about the most engaged communities or shows of all time, it's Star Wars, right? Or movies, Star Wars, right? Walking Dead, right? Breaking Bad. We can list a couple of them. Actually, comment below in this video what your favorite TV show and movie is. And give us a like on the video, but also let us know what your favorite TV show movie is. I'm very curious for everybody, and I can go over it. But that's example, right? Like episodic content that people want to follow. And you could do that with your brand, but you can only do that really through the people and the actors, right? The reason I keep watching Peaky Blinders, right? Because Cillian Murphy was killing it. That dude was amazing as Thomas Shelby, right? So I kept coming back. And that's what people want to do too. They want to keep coming back for the edutainment that you're giving them, right? You're educating them, but you're also entertaining them, not boring them to death. And they're signing off your webinar and they said this sucks, and then you're wondering why no one shows up. So you want to use these collaborations with relevant subject matter experts and influencers in your space that are talking to the people that you want to talk to. Bring them on your show. You own that audience, that you own that brand, and then create something that people feel like they have to crave and go to over and over and over again. That's what we want here, and that is what will lead to a success. When you're looking at the shows as well, make sure to create it as a different branding than your original brand as well. We've seen them working with our clients that has worked. And we've been doing this, and it's been driving pipeline, millions in pipeline. We've closed business just from doing these shows, and we're continuously doing it with more clients. And so that's something that for you all, if you're looking to implement, obviously you can hit us up, but you also could do it yourself if you want to be scrappy with it. This is something that we've seen to work very well in B2B influencer marketing. And it's not just the post, it's different because it stands out. And again, you can build your own audience with it while leveraging the influencer. Okay, so number 4 here, this one is a ton of fun, is finding an influencer and having them host your podcast. So you could obviously use number 1 and have an executive host a podcast. that you could do that if maybe you don't have the funds. You don't have the funds, mate. I actually don't know. I don't know why I did that. Actually, I'm gonna get roasted for this one, but sometimes I got very London because of Peaky Blinders. But anyways, the thing is, we want an influencer to host the podcast because now it's going to be easier for you to get credible guests in your industry. So I'll give you an example. For a client, I'm hosting their podcast right now, and I'm inviting senior sales leaders on the podcast. Now, the thing is, if it's coming from me, because I have 160,000 followers on LinkedIn, I have a lot of recognition on that platform, and most people know who I am because I've been creating for 8 years. So it makes sense for a brand to say, hey, just host the podcast and reach out to the people, because they're going to see my name and say, oh yeah, I would love to come on and talk to you because we already have a relationship, or they know who I am. And now that's going to only bolster their credibility in the market because they're partnering with me. And now they're going to be able to get more recognition with the potential buyers they want to get in front of, which are VPs of sales and chief revenue officers. So that's a real-time example that we're doing here at AMP. And it's the same thing that you could do. It's like, there are influencers in your space, micro or macro, that you could tap into and say, hey, host this podcast for us. We'll pay you X amount per month, and you can go source the guests. We'll help you source the guests. And we just need to run the conversation, because that person is most likely a subject matter expert in their space that has influence. They can hold the conversation. They can make it probably more entertaining and keep people more captivated. And so I love the takeover podcast from an influencer and having them run it by seasons. And so that's how we look at it too, is like run season, like say, hey, influencer, run this for like one season. Let's see how it goes, right? This is all an experiment. If it goes really well, renew them for season 2, season 3. Like, we see this in shows all the time, everybody. Like, we've seen people get in a role, get taken out of the role. We saw it like in Iron Man, for example, like War Machine, different actor. They changed to a different actor, right? So these things happen, but the thing is, like, you want to be able to say, we have this influencer, let's test for a season, take over the podcast, invite people on our network. It builds pipeline, it builds authority, and you can go from there. So that's the reason why you want to do that. And that's how you can start seeing success in everything that you're doing. And the last one that we're seeing crazy results with is brands. This is an interesting one. This one's been a lot of fun for me. Brands tapping influencers to not just do a post, but to speak on behalf of the brand. Let me explain what this means. So I recently just spoke at Inbound, which is HubSpot's conference, one of the biggest tech conferences in the world. Was super blessed and honored to even be a part of this. And as part of my creator agreement with HubSpot, because they're our client, we do work with them directly, they said, hey, we want you to come speak at this event around all the things I've done in sales, because I've trained a lot of tech companies on like pipeline generation. So I went there and spoke. It was a great experience. I did a deep dive workshop. And that only bolstered HubSpot's brand because they brought in a credible speaker that has done this before, like myself. And now they got elevated. I got elevated. It was a win-win for both parties. And so I would say, if you're a brand right now and you're going to events and you're having speaker slots, sure, you could have your executive speak, but get someone who already has influence in the market that people trust and they like showing up to their content anyways, and get them to speak at the conference on your behalf of the company, where maybe they seed in the product based on the topic that they have. And I guarantee you'll have more recognition that way. I even did this on accident earlier on when I started doing video selling and prospecting. I mentioned a client, or not a client, I mentioned a software that I was using on a panel, and more people just came to that booth just because I mentioned it. So that was the early stages of B2B influencer marketing. But if you're not tapping into influencers to speak on your behalf, you're missing out on potential brand authority and market share, and also pipeline. And I would encourage you to do this. So they can either do deep dive workshops like I did. They can also do keynotes, and they also can do panels. So I'm having more conversations with brands on saying, hey, yes, I can do the LinkedIn post. That's a part of the strategy for sure. But where we're seeing things crush right now is having a brand send out an influencer as a brand speaker to influence the decision makers, or even inviting them to dinners as well. I'm getting invited to dinners on behalf of brands to speak on behalf of the brand to close more business because of my influence in the space. So I would tell you to start doing more of that if you can. If you don't have the funds, go tap in a micro influencer. Have them speak, have them do a panel, have them do whatever it is to get them more involved. So Those are the 5 things that we see in B2B influencer marketing right now that are crushing it. A quick reminder for you all, I do have a checklist on how you can start checking off, are my B2B influencer marketing campaigns, are they working or not? If you're looking to implement the strategy, we at AMP are doing influencer marketing strategies. All these mentioned, we're executing them for brands right now. To the companies I just mentioned, big tech and giants in the world. But my hope is you take this information, you go execute, influences new outbound, happy pipeline building, and we'll see you on the next one.